taxa would be like a group of organisms. So naming groups of organisms is what taxonomy refers to. So the idea is we're going to apply, and you can even say, just saying the word gastropods. Gastropod, which is the fancy pants word for a snail, that is basically was developed in taxonomy. The name gastropod means stomach foot, and that's because these animals, their foot basically is how they crawl around, and their guts or their visceral mass is basically sitting right on top of their foot. So you get the idea. Taxonomy basically is, this is naming of organisms, and groups, meaning groupings of organisms. So snails as a whole, okay? All right, there's also this idea that that we want to organize. We don't want to just name them, like come up with names. We want to have names that are useful for kind of grouping things together. And I would say that humans are kind of obsessive compulsive groupers, right? Like we have these kinds of things, like these little trays, like you use these to put your silverware in or your tools, right? And so, you know, oftentimes what you would do is you'd put your forks here, right? Maybe your spoons here and your knives here, and I don't know, maybe your salad forks here or whatever. But you get the idea is that organizing things with similarly classified things, like silverware is one example, or in your dresser drawer at home. You know, you probably have a dresser at home that has 5 drawers, and on the top drawer is probably your socks and underwear. You know, on the second drawer is probably t-shirts. You get the idea, you know, is like you basically have categories or bins, and you're going to put things in there that are somehow related. I don't know how socks and underwear are related. I guess you put them on first, right? So the top drawer. And then the bottom drawer, right, of your dresser at home, the bottom drawer is probably like random stuff like, you know, headbands, and leg warmers, and one glove, right? Just like the bottom drawer of your kitchen probably has like the spatula that won't fit anywhere else, you know, just kind of random stuff, that the junk drawer, right? And in taxonomy we have junk drawers also. We'll talk about those. But anyway, so there's naming things, and then there is, like, using a bin like this, there's what's called classification. Where did my good pen go? And classification this basically is, it's basically organizing groups that, you know, for convenience. So, you know, we know that gastropods are all snails. Snails are all mollusks. Mollusks are all, you know, protostome animals. And so on and so on. So we're basically classifying organisms, you know, in some hierarchical classification, okay? All right, so this exercise, there's a couple layers to this, and for some reason, I think it's crystal clear, but for some reason, students space out and forget this part. The first exercise we're gonna do, the first thing I'm gonna have you do before I have you do anything else, is you're simply going to take all the shells out of the bin, and you're going to identify that you have all of them there. I believe we have A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. We have 7 shells with those letters, and then we have an 8th shell that has the letter O on it. So we're gonna have you take the shells out, and then one thing that's really useful to do, and this is what biologists have been doing for hundreds of years, you know, since before Linnaeus. Carl Linnaeus was the first biologist that really developed the modern classification system that we use. But we're going to do what's called a phenetic grouping or phenetic classification. So what phenetic is, so there's a couple different ways to do classification. Phenetic classification is by physical appearance. Physical appearance. And we're looking at basically grouping by similarity and differences. And this makes total sense, right? Like if I were to give you silverware, or if you go over to our dissecting pins and forceps and scissors over here and scalpels, even a kindergartner would be able to kind of organize silverware or dissecting tools or clothes into your dresser drawer. That's essentially using what's called phenetic analysis. What pheno means in Latin is form, or you can kind of see what phenetic would basically literally means physical appearance is what phonetics means. Okay, so exercise 1, and when you turn this in next week, don't forget exercise 1. I don't know why some people just space out and just leave out the first exercise, but exercise 1 is going to be, I have these clean photocopy paper, is that what you would do is you would lay your shells out on the paper, identify that you have all 8 shells, but then what you're going to do is you're going to cluster them or kind of group them into shells that you think are related, maybe more similar to each other than others. So let's say, for example, you have 8 shells, but what if I gave you that tray for silverware and said you're going to have to organize these 8 shells into 4 bins, right? I mean, I'm not giving you a bin number. I'm not giving you like you have to have 4 bins, right? I'm just saying that if I gave you this and said, okay, you got to put your shells in this, how would you arrange them? Like, which ones would you put together, implying that there's some sort of organization, like there's some sort of relatedness among them? Or maybe they're not related at all. Maybe they're all just snails and they're all different, and glory be, they're just the way they are, right? But that's not the way we operate. I mean, your tool chest at home, or your silverware drawer, or your dresser drawer at home is not organized that way. So why wouldn't we organize animals the same way, or plants, or any other organism? We're going to try to group them with things that are similar and separate them from ones that are different, right? It's kind of the basic idea. It's kind of our nature. So the first thing I'm going to have you do is, number 1, you're going to arrange the shells on the paper, and then one thing you can do is you can physically draw with like a pencil or pen circles around groups. Like, let's say you took shell A, C, and E, and you thought this is just made up. You're not following this. I just made this up. But let's say, for example, shell A, C, and E, you thought had some feature that made them common, so you put a circle around them. And then shell B and D had some other feature that you thought that they were in common. And then, we're grouping all these based on some feature that shell, G doesn't have. You get the idea. I think in logic classes, you call this like a Venn diagram, right? You've heard of Venn diagrams? Venn diagrams are kind of like inclusive and exclusive groupings. The only way this is different from a Venn diagram is there's no overlapping. We're not going to have like an overlapping circles where organisms can belong to more than one group. Like, you can't have a shell like resting on this ridge, that's in this tray and this tray. You've got to have either one or the other. You're in one bin or the other bin. You can't be in 2. So that's the first exercise to do. Okay. Any questions about that? All right, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to start off. I'm going to have you, first off, make sure that you have you identify shell A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, and then shell O. There's 8 shells. Make sure you have 8 shells. Make sure you have A through G and O. And then I want you to kind of discuss, spend 10 minutes, kind of, well, if we only had 3, 4, 5 different bins, or if you don't want to think about it too much, you can think of how would you put those 8 shells into these 4 bins, and then put some circles around that. And then what I'll recommend that you do is before you move on too much, just take a picture of it. You can use your cell phone to take a picture of your groupings, or you can certainly write the letters on that page in the circles. Okay, so let's spend 10 minutes, like 9:40. I'll let you just kind of muse on this for about 10 minutes. This is called phenetic analysis. And it is, it's the way the classification has been done for 300 plus years, probably 1,000 years. The reason why I chose snails is because I'm presuming no one knows anything about snails evolution.
Is that one shiny? Yes.
Yeah, they're all spiral, but like this one. I think this one's like maybe that's not a good group. It's a group. They're all shells.
Wow.
That's really you.
So I'm thinking like at least these two have like a specific kind of like cone shape.
Yeah, they're the only ones that go like this. They have that the lip. This one's the same.
Those are like
Yeah, it's like it has a
More
spiral.
basic
But,
snail.
yeah.
Is this one? Yeah, this one's like that too.
So
I think these 3 are gonna
I don't know. This one's kind of in between.
yeah, that one's got like, that one looks like just a smaller version. Like it's gonna grow to be unfortunately.
So yeah, and they're all similar colors.
Yeah, these 2 have like different,
they're like flat.
they're flat, thin, and gray. Oh, this one's shiny.
That one's shiny on the side. I see all the
So it says we're supposed to leave O out.
Oh,
I was asking.
I don't know.
I didn't think so. I just thought.
It would be used as the outgroup.
Okay, what's
It shows different species. Snail will be used as the
And then as you're doing that, make sure you have all 8 shells, and that each shell that you can recognize has a letter. Letter A, B, C. If you can't find that, let me know and I'll come help you. They should be written in Sharpie on the shells. Yeah.
O is the outgroup because unlike all the other ones.
That one is, what's the, do you guys have a little shell that looks like an olive? Looks kind of like an olive.
Yeah.
Which one? It actually, the genus name of it is Olivella, but it's, no, that's E. What's that one? F. Is that F? What's your shell F?
yeah.
Is it kind of like, it looks like an olive?
I see an acorn.
Or yeah, pistachio.
It's actually called an olive shell. It's common. Anyway, that's F. So let me get you a Sharpie, and you can basically write just kind of somewhere discreetly so that you know the letter name. Let's see here.
Do we want to get all sorted out?
Yeah, I was just.
If that Sharpie works, go ahead and do that. It's E.
So this one within that group?
Okay, anyone else have questions about the letters? Sometimes they get rubbed off. So let me know. Their shell F letters were really readable, and E was kind of not readable. All right. So you don't have to name them right now, but we are going to end up naming these using the rules of classification. And I'll talk about that in a bit. This is just kind of just a general, like, let's just, you know, if you were to give these shells to someone in a third grade class, what would they do? Or if you were to give these shells to Carl Linnaeus back in 1750, what would he do, you know? And that's kind of what we're operating with here. Okay, and then once you get your groupings, don't worry about overthinking it. Again, put circles around it, and I don't know, you can write letters in there, or at least take a picture of it so you can see it. And when you turn this in next week, by Monday, I want you to include your phonetic classification, which basically is your picture, or that's really nice with the letters. They did a good job there. Good job over here. Yeah, I mean, that's basically you're just going to document it with a little photo, and then you'll paste that in as number one. Number one is your phonetic classification, just by letters. All you need to do is how you group them. Okay? You're also going to share this on Thursday on the board, so it's useful to have documentation. All right? We good? We didn't need 10 minutes. You can probably do 5. Okay. Everyone cool? Anyone have any questions about this? So this is called phonetic classification. It's based on physical appearance, overall similarities and differences. It's kind of how you would organize silverware or your clothes in a dresser or tools in a toolbox, right? There's a problem here in that phonetics achieves grouping classification of names, but it doesn't really help us all that much with what's called phylogeny. So phylogeny is a whole different concept. Let's see here. Let me write this down. Phylogeny. Okay, so what phylogeny means, or what this implies, is this implies some sort of an evolutionary history. Okay? Evolutionary history. Okay, so what this means basically is, what is the overall relatedness of these groups? Now we know that, for example, if you're putting 2 or 3 shells in one of these bins or in one circle, let's say for example you put shell B and D in a circle, you're implying that they have some relatedness, that they're more closely related than either of them is to shell A, C, or E, right? But there's further questions, like what's the relationship between group A, C, and E and group B and D? Like, do they have some evolutionary history or common ancestry? Or when we're comparing shell G and F, how do they fit in, right? So once you begin adding more species or adding more organisms, you kind of want to know not just like what the immediate grouping is, but what's the overall groupings? Like are B and D and A, C, and E related in some way? Would you see that bigger circle, right? I have a circle that includes them also, right? This is what phylogeny is. Phylogeny is implying some sort of evolutionary history. And what that does is it's basically saying that adaptations occurred at some point in time in the history, and that organisms that have these adaptations are somehow related based on their common ancestry of, the ancestor that first had this new adaptation, okay? So, the problem, and this is really hard to think about, this is I want to let you know, this is an advanced exercise. This is like an exercise that you probably would get like in grad school, but I think it's worth looking at now. And that is, phonetic analysis doesn't really achieve answering questions about evolutionary history, because phonetic analysis looks at similarities, implying that if they have a shared feature, they have some common ancestor. We're also using differences. And using differences to separate groups or to make groups is kind of flawed logic in evolutionary history. Let me put it this way, okay? How about if I were to say, this is an example, I could make a group of everyone in this class that has a birthday in August, right? I could say, okay, I won't have to raise your hand because I don't want to get out yourself, but August birthdays would be a group, right? And that makes sense. Okay, everyone with an August birthday is a group. And then I could say, okay, and then the rest of the class is non-August birthdays, right? So then you're thinking, well, grouping based on August birthdays, a similarity makes sense, but grouping everyone else because they don't have a birthday in August doesn't make any sense at all, right? Like, it doesn't tell me anything about the rest of the people, right? That's kind of what phonetic analysis does, is that even though we're putting two shells in here because they look similar, that makes sense, but then saying that these shells and these shells have some sort of, higher relationship because of differences doesn't make sense. It's kind of like saying, okay, everyone with a non-August birthday, I'm buying you ice cream, right? And you're like, what? Okay, so, but you get the idea is that grouping based on a difference is kind of like backwards logic. It's kind of like saying I'm grouping you because your birthday's not this month, right? It's like using kind of a negative to group. So, but the deal is, this is how classification's been done for, at least the last 300 years, if not more. And I'll talk about Carl Linnaeus here more in a second. But in the 1950s, so only, in the recent time period, in the 1950s, a new way to approach classification was developed, and it was called cladistics. And this is the way classification is done now. This is the ideal. It's called cladistic classification. And it's based on, this is the key difference, it's based on shared, we'll go ahead and use the term derived, features. So we could probably say derived features is kind of vague, but we could use the term adaptations as, sort of an explanation of what that means. They're using derived features because it's more neutral. Adaptation kind of implies something more specific, right? That it's a feature that's for a benefit for the organism. But here we're just talking about features, whether it benefits the organism or not. If two organisms share this feature, and it's a derived feature, meaning it's a new feature, we're going to use it to group them. If two organisms either don't share a feature, or if they share a primitive feature, this is the key difference. If they share a feature that is not derived, like if it's a primitive feature, we're going to ignore that. We're not even going to pay attention to it. So this is the equivalent of me saying, okay, everyone who has an August birthday, you're a group, and everyone else will figure out how to group you later. And what we would do is we'd say September, October, November birthdays, right? We make groups that would make sense, right? But we wouldn't have groups that were based on not having a feature. Okay, make sense? All right, now it's like, you're thinking this is kind of getting abstract here, but it makes a big difference. So what you've done with number one is you have created a phonetic classification. It's just based on overall physical similarities and differences. what we're gonna do with number 2 and 3 is we're gonna do a cladistic classification. And this is going to be a brain burner. This is not as easy as it sounds, okay? So a couple things I want to point out here, some terms that you'll hear me start to throw around. Cladistics has some terminology that's really important. An apomorphy, and this is just, it probably because cladistics was developed by a German scientist, that I think, there's all this little technical jargon with cladistics. You have to kind of know what it means. So an apomorphy is the fancy way to say a derived or a new feature, okay? So let's use, I have horses as examples here. I use horses as examples in the past years. Or we could use a giraffe as an example, right? A derived feature would be the long neck, right? Would be a derived feature, an apomorphy, okay? What's called a synapomorphy is syn, S-Y-N, means share or together. Like if you're simpatico, you're thinking together, right? Working together. Synapomorphy means a shared derived feature. So it's a derived feature, an adaptation, and it's shared between two or more groups. Got it? Okay. An autapomorphy, auto means self or solo, right? Auto means your own. And autapomorphy basically means a characteristic that's unique to an organism. And we're going to come up with, for each one of these shells, you're going to have to come up with a trait that makes that shell unique in and of itself. That's going to be challenging, but it's necessary. Okay, so these are all referring to adaptations, or what we more neutrally say a derived feature, right? It's a derived feature, a derived trait. And there's a derived trait, there's shared derived traits, there's unique derived traits, and then we have what's called a plesiomorphy. Again, the term morphe means just form or trait and physical appearance. Plesio in Latin means ancient or primitive. So plesio means a primitive trait characteristic. So this is a trait, but it's something that happened or derived before, or shared by more organisms than just our immediate group. So a plesiomorphy is a primitive character. I'll give you some specific examples here in a second. An outgroup, the problem with identifying derived features is when you're looking at a trait in an organism, it's really difficult to justify whether that trait is an adaptation, a new trait, a apomorphy, or whether it is a primitive trait or a plesiomorphy, right? So you have to kind of make the decision, is this trait I'm looking at the derived trait, meaning I can use it to group organisms, or is it a primitive trait, meaning I can't use it to group organisms together, right? So an outgroup is what is used to make that decision. I'll show you how that works with our shells here. Finally, the problem that we run into is what's called convergence or convergent evolution. It's also called analogous traits. If you have two traits in organisms that look similar, but they actually came from different origins, it can trick you. I mean, we can think about this with like other animals, like wings, right? Birds have wings, and as far as we know, birds, the wing is a derived feature that they share and they got from a common ancestor. Bats have wings, but bird wings and bat wings are not shared. They're not from the same origin or from the same source. They're both used to fly and they both flap, right? But if you look very closely at bird wings and bat wings, they're made up of different sets of bones and structures. And if you look at the developmental history of them, they develop differently in embryology. And if you look at the evolutionary history, the ancestors to birds, probably evolved originally back in the Mesozoic and the Jurassic. Bats didn't appear until the Cenozoic can last, 50 million years. So they evolved separately in the fossil record. So what we'd say is that bird wings and bat wings are an example of convergence, where we have a feature, we call it a wing, but it's not from a shared common ancestor, it's totally different, okay? And that's a problem that you run into. That's why the shells are kind of fun to work, because presumably none of you are malacologists, which is the name for a snail biologist. But none of you know enough about shells to really know what features are important, so you're kind of going from a fresh perspective, which is great. All right. So these are things that keep in mind is we're looking for apomorphies or traits that we can consider to be a derived adaptation, and so we kind of have to make some decisions. All right. So let's move down to what you're going to do here. There's a table here for you to work on this. So I have shell O. Shell O, you know which shell O? No, shell O is not all of them. That's shell F. Shell O, which one's shell O? Yeah, okay, that's called, what does it look like? Volcano? It's actually called a volcano limpet. That's what its common name is. So anyway, the volcano limpet is shell O. And the reason why it is shell O is because we're going to call that our outgroup. The reason why I'm calling shell O the outgroup, and this is a semi-subjective judgment call. I mean, it's based on some decisions and some logic, but ultimately deciding what the outgroup is pretty subjective. Okay, so we're going to call it the outgroup because a couple things to note. Notice how that volcano limpet shell O doesn't have a spiral to it, right? It has no shell coil, or it doesn't have a whorl, W-H-O-R-L, whorl. It's basically kind of like just a cone, right? Cone shell. And so what I'm going to say is that shells developing in a spiral pattern is some key important feature that groups shell A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. I know in my overhead here that I have a column H. I don't believe that your handout has a column H, does it? It does? Your handout does? Okay, I don't think we have a shell H. Oh, it does, yeah. Anyway, I think the shell H I took out. So I think all we have is A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. Is that true? Okay, so shell H, you can put a line through. Anyway, shell A, B, C, D, E, F, and G basically have a spiral, or the shell coils in some way, twists, whereas shell O doesn't. And we're using that as kind of our first grouping trait here. And so here's how this works. Is you're going to look at your shells and you're going to come up with features that two or more shells have in common. Like you're going to look for features that you can use to group 2, 3, or 4 or more shells. At least 2, and as many as 7 shells can be grouped by whatever features you find. So then the question is, how do you phrase it? How do you identify whether the feature you're looking at is an adaptation, or how do you say it's a primitive trait? So we're going to use the outgroup as always the primitive condition. Outgroup is the primitive reference. So when you're doing this, the volcano limpet's always going to be our primitive state. So for our purposes, the outgroup will always have a 0 in that column. But I'd recommend not just filling it in with zeros, because you want to think about this. So the outgroup is kind of our primitive reference. It'll always have a 0. So we're using a binary system here. If you're familiar with binary, zeros and ones, basically 0 means no, 1 means yes, right? It's like off and on, right? So if it's 0, it means it doesn't have it. If it's a 1, it means it has it, right? It's kind of how it works. That's binary. Okay, so if a shell develops in a spiral pattern, the outgroup, the limpet, isn't a spiral, it's just a cone. and the rest of them have some sort of a twist or whirl, right? Even the olive shell, it's like an internal twist, you can see. Okay, then what you're gonna do is you're gonna put the number 1 in all the shells that have the feature. In this case, everyone does. And then you're gonna write on the right-hand column, you're gonna write the letters of all the shells that have a 1 in them. And we're gonna use this grouping as a way to classify in a little bit. Okay, sound good? Okay, let me give you another one, just because I want to help you out in thinking about how to do this. Notice how well, here, check this out. I've given you a kind of a little shell anatomy diagram here. And again, these terms, I just copied these out of a couple invertebrate textbooks, just so you can have some ideas. But look at this shell. This shell, so we have the opening of the shell is called the aperture. You can just call it the opening. And then the coily parts of the shell are called the whorls, W-H-O-R-L-S. So here is our aperture or opening and our whorls. Here's our aperture and our whorls. And you'll see that some shells have this, what's called a siphon or a lip off the edge. And other shells don't, right? Like this shell has basically an aperture that's kind of contiguous. It's kind of smooth all the way around. And this one has kind of like, like almost has a little snarl. It has kind of like a little snarled lip or whatever. The aperture sort of has a lip on it, right? It's called a siphon. So that's a good one. I'll give you that one. So the question then is, okay, how would you phrase that? Shell with siphon lip, or would you say shell without siphon lip? So here's the way it works is you're gonna write the character state here in number 2, but you have to decide whether you write it as is the siphon lip the apomorphy, or is the no siphon lip the apomorphy? So then you're gonna look at your limpet, your volcano limpet, and go, okay, does the limpet have one or not have one? Is the aperture in the limpet kind of contiguous all the way around, or is there a flare in it? And yeah, it's kind of like just basically a circle all the way around. It's kind of like the aperture or everything else, right? So you write the phrase as that having the siphon lip is the adaptation. So how you write it is shell with siphon in adaptation, or however you want to write it, shell with siphon, or aperture with siphon lip. Okay? Then you need to go through all your shells and identify all the ones that have a siphon lip and give them a 1, and all the shells that don't have a siphon lip and give it a 0. And as a hint, the outgroup is always 0, right? Make sure the outgroup is always 0, meaning it doesn't have a feature. That's how you phrase it, right? So which ones are going to get a 1 for that, for siphon lip? A has a siphon lip, sure. What other ones? B has a siphon lip. Anything else have a siphon lip? Maybe F. And this is going to be for you to decide too. So maybe F does. Okay. So so we want to make sure that you understand how that goes. So what you're going to do is you're going to put a 1 on A and B and maybe F. That's your judgment call. And then everything else is going to get a 0, right? Make sense? And then on this column here, you're going to write the letters A, B, F. That's the ones you have. And then you're going to move on to the next tree. Okay? So, here's the recommendation. Traits need to be physical features. Size is not a good trait. Like you can't say small or large, because what if it was an immature one versus a mature one, right? I mean, they grow as they get older, so that's not a good trait. But what you can use is kind of proportions. Like you can use like longer than wide. Like for example, you can say something like if you look at the aperture, if the aperture is really long and narrow, you can say aperture is twice as long as it is wide, or over twice as long as wide. And that gives you an implication that the shape of the aperture is long and skinny, versus the aperture being roughly about as wide as long. Kind of implies it's kind of round, right? So you can imply proportions, but not size. Or what about this? The whorl sometimes is very, very long compared to the aperture, and sometimes it's very, very short. Look at the like the shell A has a whorl that's about as long as the aperture is long, right? But it's about roughly the same. And then look at the abalone, shell C. In the abalone, the aperture is huge, but the whorl's super tiny, right? So you can kind of use these as other mechanisms. In order to phrase that, you'd have to look at the limpet and decide what's going on with the limpet, which in that case it probably doesn't really have a whorl at all. So it's more like the abalone. Okay. Other features, texture. We can't really use color because color is a really flexible, what's called a plastic feature in genetics. Color can basically just be a heritable trait, within a population, but we can use like textural features. Like some of these shells are very smooth, meaning they don't have what they're calling here transverse stria or periostrical hairs. Those are referring to the cross texture and the longitudinal texture. Some of them are very smooth. Some of them only have transverse stria but not periostrical hairs. Some of them have both. So you can use texture as a feature there. So again, color and size are bad, but proportions and physical traits are useful. Let's see, one last thing here is, also, each shell needs to have a feature that's unique to it alone, right? So when you're looking at features to identify, make sure that along the way you have a case where, like, for example, shell A is the only one with a 1 and everything else is 0. You gotta do that. And that's called the odd apomorphy. And what that does is it recognizes that species as its own feeding by itself. And if you don't have that, the cladogram is not going to work properly. Question? Color is just generally a bad thing. So use physical. Oh, that kind of shiny layer on the inside. Yeah, so you could use that as an odd apomorph. You can use that as its own feature. Good question. Even though I mentioned color as being bad or whatever, for example, the abalone is the only one that has the shiny inner layer. You could use that as its own thing. Okay, that's fine. Good question. Okay, this is going to take you some time. And yeah, you need to do all 18. That's a minimum. Like I should have, but I found that 18 is okay. So we're going to come up again with any trait that seems to group 2 or more shells, and then also you're going to burn up 7 of them with just unique traits to that one shell alone, right? So here you go. Have at it. I'll come around and try to help you out. And, ideally, you're working together, but, 2 people at the same table can have different answers. It's just a lot easier if you work together.
Do one with both transverse and I really just do one.
Questions?
G.
Yeah. I don't know how I think you're equal. To decide whether you write with siphon or without siphon. I'm misunderstanding you, but basically if you're using siphon as the feature, you gotta decide whether having the siphon is the apomorphy or not having the siphon is the apomorphy. And because the limpet doesn't have consistent on such as something else, that you'd say, okay, this is the primitive case, so with siphon is the apomorphy. So you'd write it shell with siphon. And then the one means yes. And that's how you decide yes or no. Yeah. Okay. How's it going?
It's going.
Good? Okay. All right. I'll just come around and see how it goes, and I'll come give you hints along the way. Questions? Looking good? Okay. Looking good. Any questions? Basically, these are grooves or streaks that go across the. That has transverse.
Yeah.
This one
They go both ways.
periostraces.
Okay, how's it going?
Compared to the bottom.
So you're saying that because the limpet has both, if any of them lack one or the other or both, yeah.
I would say this one would be a best example.
One shell, this one is
Periostracals would not transverse.
You decide. This one's
Periostracals, not transverse. These are different. This one has
How's it going? Good? Okay. Seven. Okay. Couple features to think about. Notice how the abalone has those little holes in it. Those are called respiratory holes or gill holes. And there is, I think, the moon shell has a hole in it that's actually a predator hole. So don't mistake that. See how that one has that? That's actually a predator.
This might be a bad question because this one has.
Having those holes, those respiratory holes, is a feature where the gills come out. If any of you do abalone fishing at all, that's a good one. But the question then is having a respiratory hole an apomorphy or is it primitive? And again, you look at the limpet, and you see the limpet also has a hole, right? So having a respiratory hole is not the apomorphy, it's lacking. So that's why it's.
So these are both
Phrase it right.
good.
Okay.
Both
It is. Yeah, just pointing out that the moon shell sometimes doesn't have a little hole in it. Not maybe yours. That's a predatory snail. Does that? Gets on there. Little snail
This one has ridges. Those are the breathing holes he was just talking about. This one also has the ridges.
Yeah, and that one's the only one that has actual breathing holes. So the other holes are.
Yeah, I'll be right back. Keep going.
So we just
Yeah. They didn't give us an actual name for it. I mean,
spines
spiral.
on whorls.
And that one doesn't have any other one. They. And the breathing holes within that. Did you count that as It's not spikes. We're saying
Yeah.
the breathing ones. So it's had its own
This one has
category.
tiny spikes on it. So,
I don't know. I feel like
they
it's
go
more
like-
bumpy. It's more like ridges than spikes.
We should do spikes and
Yeah. We're also doing breathing things. Ridges, breathing ones.
That's good.
Well, breathing holes are in the, breathing holes are primitive.
Yeah. Is that what you just said?
Yeah. So like the transverse stria and the periostracial hairs, the primitive one
This
has
doesn't
breathing holes.
look like breathing holes though. It doesn't go all the way through like those ones. These ones look more like barnacles. Am I right?
You actually might be right.
Because like those ones are.
Yeah, this one definitely looks like just stuff that's attached to it.
Yeah, because this
Okay.
one's in a perfect arrangement with the spiral. And that one, it's not.
So he said that this particular hole was.
I don't
I
know.
think he said that it was a breathing hole.
Okay, so that one.
Multiple
So you
breathing
could
holes.
phrase it as like the shell latch. A breathing hole.
Yeah.
And just do all the other ones.
Okay, and sometimes in the process of trying to find a unique feature for each shell, you actually find ones that two shells share. So that's a useful. I think that's a way to do first, is to try to go for each shell with its own unique feature. The only one that doesn't need one, obviously, is the outgroup. We don't care if it has anything unique, right? Because it's the outgroup. Yes.
So this one here, does it have an apex?
Not really.
Right,
No, because
okay.
it doesn't have a whorl. Yeah.
So you could say that F lacks transverse stria because it only has the sideways ones.
Except for F. Yeah, this one comes to a point, this one comes to a point. It's smooth, but it does have an apex because it spirals. I think anything that spirals would have an apex technically. Just you can't see this one.
Yeah, this
one
has just very, very flat.
Yeah.
So this one is D. All have an apex
Besides the, yeah.
So, like, first one, yeah, go that one. What do you think?
Is it inverse
I think it
apex?
does, it's just kind of like, maybe some damage to that.
I was gonna say, I thought I was thinking chipped. That's what I was thinking. I think only one of them. Oh, I just said wow. So I think only one of them does.
Maybe that's what
No.
you back in a second here. Keep going. You got a long way to go.
Yeah, you're talking about the
Because it's kind of flat, it doesn't look spiral.
The one she's got yeah. So
She has ridges, not spikes.
it's like it emerges and then this one's almost you describe that as ridges? That's uneven, it's not smooth.
I mean, I think it's definitely textured. It's got the.
I think so.
I'd say this one's more wavy.
It's got like, well, those are reasons.
Well, if you ignore the front and you see how it's not smooth, I would say it's something
Like the transverse stria, like the cross patterns.
Yeah.
I would see.
Yeah.
See the, oh,
This one doesn't, because it's I mean, it looks like it, but I think that's just the texture. Yeah. The way that you can show one. So this one is no, this one is D. This one is not. It has sutures. I would say because it's not, whatever isn't smooth for
the big one.
Yeah.
I would say it has spikes, and I would say it's because if you move like this, you know, you can move down over it. Just think of like cladistic. That was it. Yeah. See?
It's in my hand. I'm like, wait a second. Not really. It's got the.
It's not more of like an outer. I don't think
It's got ridges on the inside though.
I would say yeah, just because of how it goes out. So walk over so okay, I'm gonna see what you got.
I've heard that's what I don't know which one is what C was.
Oh yeah. No doubt about it. Okay, so we have ABC, EG.
Would you say that this one has the perio? Or just the one that just kind of looks like the newer one.
There's only one that has it kind of seems like a little bit because there's like the darker, lighter, but it's not just the color.
I think it's just the color. I'm trying to look at the shine of it.
I'm not seeing anything in it either, so I think it's just the color.
Yeah, I'll just say
Actual
that one.
striations.
That one's beach gray. That one's also
So how
wax.
it's, yeah, that's the only one, and that one looks like C.
So it goes down to C.
Thank you. So I'm
They also usually the lines how to
Oh,
keep
yeah.
going in.
I would say texture, but you have to be specific with the texture.
Oh, like a
smooth.
Yeah, I was like, so far E.
It's kind of difficult because you can't like toss around different traits because you have to go based off of like what this
Yeah, you have to do
doesn't have.
Yeah, Illinois has to
I
be
mean, I would
zero.
say that's definitely not smooth. So that's just the outside.
It does look like it has like the ridges.
Yeah. So maybe we should be doing wax for this.
That's what I did. I did.
Yeah.
Which ones were smooth?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
So everything is opposite.
Yes. Right.
Exactly. Or should it be easy?
Oh, I don't think it would because the interloop is supposed to be under the world.
I'm just having a hard time picking out like unique traits.
This is sweet. It does to the
Yeah.
spikes, but it's
One I was kind of wondering what it is.
I mean, it's not rocky like this. That's the thing. This is smooth and rare, so I would say this is smooth compared to that.
I would say that's
Heard
it's
of
not
it.
that great. I don't think it does. Do you think there's ridges there? They're kind of really
I don't know, with that one, I was kind of thinking that it's kind of just the patterns from the outside since it's the finished shell.
Yeah.
I don't know if the ridges are in the actual shine of it. It doesn't seem to. But I don't know, because it seems to be just the same pattern.
It looks like the color patterns on the Okay, I'll say that it lacks them.
It has ridges, really tiny. I'm gonna just say compared to it's longer because it's not super rough, but it is at the same
It's like microscopic.
It's just tiny. It's just lines. I'm like, I think they're probably ridges. It's the outside ridges. So I'd assume so.
That one's
Yeah.
so I'd say it halves them.
Yeah, I know, I'm changing that. So, do you want
It'd be visible to do that.
do you need anybody? Sorry, they're like all cranked over here.
What letter is that tiny one? G?
Yeah,
So I'm switching my answer up. No, I'm like, wait, no.
it does look six.
I need C and G. Yeah, that's and then let's see.
Definitely have those.
Yeah, I would say this one is considered smooth. A? Is A which one's A? Really? Oh, that's weird. Which one's A? Is this B? This one?
Yes.
Okay, what'd you say that's?
It's smooth on the inside. I would say maybe I should put smooth on. It has like a little. I don't know. I feel like texture here has to do with the.
Okay, What'd you figure out? Any questions? Welcome table. How's it going? Questions?
I'm cooked.
Fine. Got some good unique features. Good. That's
I
good.
would say that
Good
one
space.
last word is.
Yeah, if you're stuck, just start looking for unique features for each one. You know, that'll burn up 7 of them.
Okay, let's
Yeah.
do unique features.
Okay.
Where did see? Okay, we need to do like inside now because we're just doing feel like that.
Yes. Yeah. But what you could do is like, I'm trying to think of something. Like see on this one. See how on the
We do ones that are like
inner lip there's like these
Do you
teeth.
think that this still count as
Or
unique?
what other one has it?
I would think so.
Yeah, this one has.
this one is not with them.
Yeah.
Because I think
That's where you can
Oh,
use
it's
like
definitely
the
not.
just
But the
makes it
edges
more
are like
This one I think has teeth on it.
Because I don't know if it really specifically means that tiny little section, or if it just means
F.
the spiral.
This
I
would be
mean,
yeah.
two on the outside.
Most of the spirals have these, so I might just pretty smooth on the end.
The operculum's not present. The operculum is a plate that put on the outside of the shell. So yeah, I know.
F has this.
Sometimes you can get them in jewelry shops and make like rings out of these.
I don't know, I'm going back to the
What other features? Oh, teeth.
Yeah, I think it's just the very much the tip of it.
It's called umbilicus.
Like even this one, like this image.
Umbilicus.
I guess it doesn't label it as an apex though.
You look on the whole
Apex.
When it comes to a point,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, there's definitely a point, but is it counted?
So there's the umbilicus, and then this one has a unique feature. This one has like.
They'll probably come over here. We can ask them.
I would
Just
say
got 2 ideas. How's it going?
So on the smaller one, would this still be considered an apex?
Yes, even though it's real shallow.
Yeah.
It's so the apex is actually much shorter than the aperture. It's big, so yeah, you can use that kind of feature.
So with the this is still considered an aperture, right? Okay.
Yeah, and but the apex basically is where the siphon is. Oh, sorry, the siphon. The respiratory. So yeah, so this is still an aperture. But there's no inner or outer. They were asking about inner versus outer. There's no inner or outer on that one, so there's no whorl.
Right.
Okay, good questions. Well, other cool features are just to give you hints. Let's see here. So this one has like teeth in the aperture, these little teeth in there. And that's, I don't know, probably to hold the operculum in or something, but that has them. And there might be some other ones. Yeah, that one has kind of similar teeth on there. Probably to hold the operculum in place, like a little lacking key. Another feature is cool is this umbilicus. This one has, if you look here, where the whorl starts, right at the aperture, there's like a little hole, and the umbilicus means the belly button of the that one. I think that's one too. Just a couple ideas. How's it going? Questions?
Unique features.
Yeah, you got some unique features, you got some great features. Well, you've gone through all unique.
I don't know.
But you gotta start, you need to get some that are grouped together.
Which ones do you have?
That's good.
Oh, right, we're
how's it
talking
going
the
over here?
unique features.
Yeah, we're the
DNA,
same.
Yeah.
Don't worry about that yet.
B and S. What are the unique features that you found in B and S?
For B, I'm not sure on that one because I said it had the deepest sutures. It has the really deep sutures compared to the rest of them.
And then you have
For F, I put the shell has an internal whorl.
Okay.
I don't know. This one, the little
That one,
olive.
yeah, he did say it was in the internal world, but he.
All right.
The other ones have that, or?
Okay, how's it going? Looking good?
I have so many uncompleted ones. I have to go back. So
Any questions? So most groups, one group back at the back table, looks like they have all their traits and they're kind of doing their math and additions and stuff. Other groups look like they have maybe 3 or 4 traits left to figure out, right? And then some groups still have quite a few to go. So I think, you know, so what I want to make sure we do though is I make sure that we explain to everyone at the same time how to do the next step, right? So a couple of things that we need to do before we go is make sure you have your character trait table all done, and then you added up all your character states. And then I'll show you how to do the next stage all together. But you know, some people are still catching up. You're a little ahead.
Does anyone have a unique?
It's not worth explaining more than once. So I'll do it at once. And then I need to go over the rules of taxonomy.
Yeah.
And as part of this exercise, you're going to name shells. So you need to have some rules for how shell naming needs to go. So that's what we'll do to finish up. On Thursday, we're going to share your results. You're going to write your results up on the board. So if you haven't finished your character table or you don't get your cladogram today, you'll have a little bit of time on Thursday before we do that.
Yeah.
So let's just go ahead and say, like, I'm going to give you 10 more minutes. And I know you're antsy, you're almost done. I mean, Oprah's probably on at 11. You want to get home and watch that. But just sit tight, get your list done.
Are there any other?
I know the instructions say to add up the character states to one.
I just saw the
Make
one.
sure you also include the one I gave
That one
you.
and that one are the
For
only
some
two
reason,
that-
when people add them up, they forget to include the one that I provided, right? So don't forget that one.
And then I haven't finished.
And you'll see that it asks you to add up all your ones and then write that number here on the bottom row. But that includes the one that I gave you. Also, note that the outgroup, the limpet, should have no ones in it, right? I haven't really seen that. Last semester, like, it seemed like half the groups totally missed that. The outgroup is always 0, right? Outgroup's always 0? Okay. Yeah, so what you can do is you can think about like you're probably thinking like the robustness of the mass of the shell. So you can maybe do like the thickness of the shell versus the actual. Maybe that one maybe like shell B, for example. Let's talk about shell B. Shell B is like this. That one, like, the shell is like maybe half as
Oh,
thick as
for
the
unique
actual
for that one. Okay, so I have
Whereas the one the shell B has, maybe the shell is like 1 to that.
CAF.
That's kind of getting at the idea.
It's tiny.
You can kind of, someone else can do it there. You can't just say thick shell. Sorry?
So I need.
Oh, I mean, we had a way to measure it.
There's that one I put that it has like the rows, like it's kind of similar to the spikes here, but it's not quite like a spike, but it has those like.
Okay, you're looking good. I think that's in good shape. You're in pretty good shape. You got probably a bunch of odd apomorphies you can do to get down the row. You're doing pretty good. You're doing pretty good. At least your shell list there, and cooperate on this. And you have all zeros on your output, right? Yeah. Okay, so like 8 minutes, like a 20 till. I'll give you instructions for how to do the next stage. All right? Yeah. Yeah, I was telling them that maybe you could like make some adjustment, like this one's super thick and like this one's super thin. You could say something like the shell is half as thick as the aperture is wide, whereas like this one is like the shell is like less than 1/10. Yeah, just some measure to say thick and thin, but it has to be something that someone else could.
I was kind of confused about it too. I'm not sure if it refers to the whole spiral or if it's just this tiny little.
So I gave some hints to some tables, I'll tell everybody the teeth in the aperture, like a couple shells have these little teeth in there to hold the operculum in place. The operculum's missing in all these shells. It fell out because it's attached to the foot. But those teeth are what hold the operculum in place. That's one cool feature that a couple shells have. The umbilicus, which literally means belly button, is a little kind of a hole where the inside of the whorl is. A couple shells have that. One of them actually has a little flap over the umbilicus, which is unique to that shell. What other features can you look at? You know, I think other features would be basically kind of comparing the spire height to the aperture height, or the number of whorls, or the dimensions of the aperture, whether it's a long, skinny aperture, whether a round aperture.
I got G.
All pretty
They
good.
said that
So
like
6 more minutes, and then we'll show you how to do the next
it's just an easy.
So this one has 3 worlds. Is this true?
Yeah.
Lying?
So you said one of them has a flap over the umbilicus. That's unique to the shell. I think that's
So, oh yeah, it does have a flap.
Is it
This
just
one
the top
doesn't.
section?
Right.
Right.
It's just got a hole.
The apex is just the tip, but the spire is the whole whirly coily part.
So the entire.
This is the whole spire. These are individual whorls. So you could duck number of whorls. You know, 5 whorls, less than 5 whorls, and obviously the outgroup has less. You know.
Yeah, which one has
I put A did.
Okay. What about spines? Like shell A has those spines, like those little knobs on it. That's a good one for the shell A. What else?
Is that the only one? Yes.
So like 4 more minutes, and I'll go over how to do the next part. I guarantee you, if you try to do the next part on your own, you're not going to do it right.
That's crazy.
Don't worry, you'll get out of here today before noon. We'll keep you here the whole time.
Sorry, my bad.
So G.
I'd say
I'm gonna do 3 worlds or 5 worlds.
I can't.
Anything, as long as you can explain it right, someone else could understand what you're saying. Yeah, there's really no wrong. Just well supported, poorly supported answers, right?
Yeah.
That's what science is all about.
I need more.
Yes.
Can we get a hint on the unique trait of E?
Oh, well, you know, the name of that's called a slipper shell, and the reason is because it looks kind of like a Norwegian clog, you know, the wooden shoes there, and so you can see how the see on that one. Well, the unique one on that one, it only has teeth on the inner lip, or is the outer lip? Outer lip of the aperture has a tooth or teeth. I think the only one that has the outer lip.
Oh.
The other thing is that it's kind of like a Norwegian wooden clog or whatever. Is its whorl is kind of all contained in one plane. You know, it doesn't really have a spire. I'm just kind of come up with ideas. Also, the unique features can be a little bit more flaky. You can have it be a little bit more plastic.
Yeah.
You know. So, I mean, I wouldn't say the shell is called a slipper shell.
I think B.
Right, yeah.
But, you know, you get the idea. You can be creative.
Oh, you just
Yeah.
The Dalmatian shell.
Not the color belly.
Yeah.
Okay, like 3 minutes, and I'll talk about how to do the second part.
So
The
it's
third
this
part,
little
sorry.
flap thing as to
Oh, and that's
this.
the only one that's.
You guys, actually, everyone's done really well.
Other
You're a lot faster than previous classes, but I don't know if it's you understand it better, or
I need.
you're smarter, you're less patient. I don't know, one of those three. We're all the above.
I need B.
B, F, G, that's what I'm. So.
Do they specifically need all to have?
Let's see, yeah.
How many of you have botany also today?
No.
One? A couple? Just you? No one else has botany? Do you have botany also?
Okay, so I only need.
That makes for a long day, 8 to 5 basically.
I need B, F, and G.
All right. How many have already had botany? Just a couple, 3, 4,
We have.
5, 4, 5? Good.
Oh, is it? I was like, no, they didn't have it today. It's 8 a.m. My brain is
Botany's
fried.
fun.
Hey.
Okay, like 2 minutes and I'll come back and show you how to do the third part.
For B, I did it has like really deep sutures.
And did you finish the nuclear world? Because that's all I'm
We
missing.
don't mind if I copyright.
B. Some people mind.
B has.
I feel like we're more.
Yeah. Yeah, I just need the nuclear world. That's all I need.
For the nuclear worlds, I just put A and B because they have
Deep
those, like,
sutures.
and G too. I'm gonna put G on that. Yeah.
It is the only one that has deep ones like that, so.
Okay, now let's count this up.
Blasting through this right now.
Do you want to see anything? Do you want to?
There's a couple, I just wanna look through them. I just need.
B, E, D. Have you done that one?
So I have
Another one that was not used also, and then I can just build it right now.
C.
I could do.
I wish we could do color. That would be so easy.
Oh, I have all of them.
This one.
The collection.
Would this have a body roll, do you think? Or separates from the top?
Yeah, I know, that's what we're thinking. Like, what is that?
Because this would be the top.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that would
Like, chuck out lips and like,
Yeah.
another.
I'd actually put that on.
I cannot count.
Yeah, I would say that's a body roll. And this one is
Should I go to?
this one I would say the top.
All right. So I know some groups are pretty much done, which is great. Some groups still have maybe 3 or 4 traits to come up with, which is fine. You'll have time today to finish that. But let me go over how to go on to the next stage. This is, it's like a Sudoku, it's like a puzzle, okay? So you gotta have to pay attention here. It's really tricky. So, everyone listening, real quick, even though if you're still looking at traits, just take a listen real quick. So you have your character states done, meaning you have, the out group has all zeros, you have all these trait states that you've written in here, and you have ones in either a couple, 3 or 4, or maybe just one by itself, right? You've got indicated a 1 for at least 1 or a pair or 3 or 4 of these shells. Make sure you write your groupings, the shells that have the 1, in the right-hand column, because it's going to be important for how to do the analysis. Okay, everyone cool with that? Then you're going to add up all the ones in each column, including the one I gave you. So you got to do that. Everyone's got at least a 1. There's always 1 divergent state at a minimum. But then some of them are going to have maybe as many as 10. What was the biggest number of ones that so far? What's like the biggest number of divergences do you have? 11? 9. Okay, so yeah, it's typical. And everyone's different, right? I mean, like, the idea here is we have, multiple universities kind of working independently. And the cool idea is, and we've also pretty much come up with traits sort of independently, even though I've given you some ideas, is if you all come up with similar answers in some cases, that's pretty good. Like, that's almost like a hypothesis test, right? Like, if we have multiple groups that came up with the same result independently, that's in statistics what they call that is robust. Robust means that, like, it's pretty obvious answer. Like, this comes up again and again and Good. Okay, so make sure that when you add up your number of divergences, that it includes the y gave you in all the ones. You don't need anything in this box here. That's in the box. Okay, so this is what's called a Wagner tree. And this is how it works. Okay, so this, I recommend using pencil because you're going to need to do some erasing. Or if you don't have a pencil, I have a pencil up here. There's a few pencils running around. If you don't have a pencil, just go ahead and start by using only a quarter of this target. It's kind of like a target, right? It's like a pistol target or something, or an arrow target. But just use a quarter of it, because if you make a mistake, you can scratch that out and work somewhere else, right? But the idea is, this is like a divergent state graph, is what it is. Okay. So the center, you know what I should have done? I should have made that just a zero, like a hollow dot. The center represents the outgroup. The center represents no divergences from the outgroup. So ultimately, you don't need to put the outgroup on this diagram because the center essentially is the outgroup. Okay? So that's one way to think about it. So then you need to put your shells, the letter of your shells on this diagram, but put the letter on the ring that represents the number of divergent states that you have. So if you had, like, if shell, like for, how many are done? Are you guys done? You guys back there? For like shell A, how many divergences does shell A have? 11? So you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. If you had more than 11, you can just add a partial ring. Don't let this limit your creativity. You can put more. But you're going to put letter A on the 11th ring. You can either write it right onto the line, or you can put a dot and put the letter next to it, right? But shell A, in their case, is on ring 11. Not everyone has on ring 11. Some probably have like ring 9 or ring 8 or whatever you have, right? But you're going to put your shell A on that. Shell B goes on some other ring, right? Or maybe it had 11 also. What was your shell B? 9. So they would put shell B on ring 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, right? Okay, here's one suggestion. Don't put them in a line, because we're going to make a branching diagram to these. Think of the letters as like fruit hanging on a fruit tree, right? We're going to make a tree to connect all these letters together. So if you put them in a line, we're not going to be able to do branches at all, okay? So just kind of scatter them sort of randomly around in this order. But that's why I said pencil is useful, because you may have to move them, or, you know, if 9 doesn't work here, you can move it over here, right? So they're movable letters on that ring. Okay, so you're going to put all 7 shells on your diagram, linking them to the ring that matches the number of divergences, okay? Got it? Okay, then what you're gonna do is, you need, so you read this, it says, what we're gonna do is we're gonna develop what's called parsimony. And I don't know if you've ever used this word parsimony before, but parsimony is kind of a fancy way to say agreement, right? Like if you have parsimony with something, it means you have peaceful agreement with something, right? Isn't that how it means, like the definition of parsimony? Anyway, parsimony means we're coming up with a simple agreement among our relatedness. And how are you going to do this? And this is really important to work this way. And I know everyone wants to do a shortcut, or you have your own maverick way to do it. We'll do it this way because it's consistent. Is you're going to start by drawing a line from the center dot, which is the outgroup, to your least divergent shell. So in some cases, like the least divergent shell would be like the abalone. Shell C is like found on ring 2 or 3, right? True? Which one was your least divergent shell? C, or was it? Yeah, usually. Now, that doesn't have to be not wrong. Maybe shell D is your least divergent. Who knows? Okay, So draw a line directly from the outgroup to your least divergent shell. If that's shell C, something else, right? So straight line from the outgroup to that shell.
The one that has the.
Now, here's where it starts getting complicated. Go to your next shell. Now, maybe you have two shells on the same ring, like maybe shell 3 has shell D and shell C on it. Just draw it to one of the other. Any shell on the same ring has the same priority. So you're just gonna pick which one you go to first. But then what you're gonna do is you're gonna find the next more divergent shell, whether it's on the same ring or the next ring, and you need to link it back to that common branch. So you have this, let me go ahead and draw this here, I'm just gonna show you. It'd be nice if I had a diligent mark on that, but okay, so here's kind of an example. Here's my diagram like this. I guess I can put this on my projector.
Do you think it's like that?
So here's sort of how it goes like this. Okay, so I said maybe shell C was on ring 3. I'm just making this up. Shell D and shell B. I'm just gonna make some stuff up here. So here's how you do this. Start by connecting your least divergent shell back to the origin or the outgroup with a line. That's the root of your tree, the stem of the trunk of your tree. Okay? Then you're going to go and find the next more divergent shell, and you're going to see how it connects back to here. But what parsimony means is we're going to use the shortest and fewest lines possible. I mean, I can just go here and draw it straight back. That doesn't tell me anything about relatedness, right? So what I want to do is I want to go, okay, shell D and shell C, how many traits how many apomorphies do they have in common? And to do that, you go look at your list here and go, okay, how many times do specifically shell C and D come out together? And you just basically count them up. If they come out together 2 times, they're all going to come out together at least 1, because I gave you one that had all with 1s, right? So everyone's going to have at least 1 trait in common, bare minimum. Let's say, for example, you found that in addition to the one I gave you, shell C and D had another one that was in common. Even if it had other ones there, but just they were grouped together by something else. So what you do is you go 1, 2, and then you draw a line out to shell D. Okay? Right? So that's all fine and dandy. Now we go out to the next most divergent shell. And in this case it's B, but for you probably something else. Now you want to see how does B connect back here, but we want to use the fewest lines possible. So we're going to see how many things do B and D have in common. Count them up. But it gets more complicated because we also want to make sure it's an agreement with how many things B and C have in common. So you're now going to have to come up with pairwise lists. Like, okay, B and D have, let's say, 4 things in common. And B and C have 2 things, B and D have 3 things in common. And B and C have 2 things in common. So in that case, you would go, okay, if B and D have 3 things in common, you go 1, 2, 3. And then you connect B at ring 3. So what you're doing is you're connecting them based on the number of shared derived features or synapomorphies. And that's kind of the logic we're using here. That's why we're saying cladistics is always about shared derived features used for groupings. We're not worried about differences at all, okay? Okay, so as you go out, you're going to end up having to make more and more comparisons. So you may have to make little sub-lists of like, okay, A and F have how many in common, and then comparing them to other groups. You're always going to link it to the one that has more in common with. Now, it's going to happen where you end up with having to make some decisions when there's like a tie. Like let's say, for example, a shell has the same number of things in common with one shell as another shell, and so you don't know whether to put it there or there. You're going to have to make a judgment call. And this is where this becomes somewhat subjective. We're trying to make this as objective as possible. Objective means you're not putting your own judgment into it. It just is what it is. But this is not truly objective. It's kind of semi-objective. And the subjectiveness comes in where you have to make judgment call decisions on where to connect them. Or the subjectiveness also comes in because we're using the procedure of working our way out. You could just as validly work from the outside back to the origin if you wanted to. There's multiple ways to do it. We're doing it from the root to the tips, and that's just our method. But ultimately, you would do all possible starting points to make this valid. But this is just a way to do it. You have a question in the back there?
You answered it.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so give it a shot. I'm going to come around and tell you, okay, a couple things. You can't cross lines. Lines can't cross. So if, for example, you need to move a letter to make it connect and not cross, move the letter before you connect it. And two is you can't have a letter connect to more than one stem, right? I mean, in a tree, they always branch out, right? You can't have, for example, B connect here and here, right? That's not the way it works. So it's always bifurcated branches. You may end up with triple branches, like when you connect A, you may end up with something like this, where it's got 3 in common with B and D. That's okay. It just doesn't tell you anything about the relationship between these three. This is not ideal, but it's not wrong. Okay, it just means you don't have enough information. Okay, so I'll come around and give you a hand on that. Get you started at least. And then I gotta go over how taxonomy rules and classification goes. And we don't necessarily need it for Thursday, but the deal is in order to turn this in, you're gonna need a name on your shells. And I wanna give you some rules for how to do that so you can start thinking about some names. So let's plan on like 10 minutes. I'll come around and help you with this. And then in 10 minutes, I'll go over some rules of taxonomy. And then we'll call it. I mean, you can stay and finish it if you want, or you can,
So if you're so let's say like
All right. Let me
I
come
live
back
my
to the
life,
group
right?
that's fancy to
And,
get done here. And
G and E have 3 things in common.
figure it out.
This line is not 3 things long. Can I just do that?
Well, one problem already.
I don't know.
You're implying that E led to G and whatever, but E should have its
So
own
like,
trait.
so yeah, like if F and E have one thing in common,
This looks like a middle schooler.
they should have one.
No, they do. You're going off of the number of the circles, so C and E, they have 4 things in common. 1, 2, 3, 4. If they had 3 things in common, I would do the line from, or 2 things in common, I'd do the line from the second circle to E. But they had 4 things, so I did it from the same spot. And then this one had 5 things, so I did it from the same spot.
Man,
So it's not really looking right, you know?
no, yeah.
And I don't know where to go after
1, 2,
that.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Well,
Yes, I mean, it's not
is that 7?
wrong
It's 8. So G is
you have some letters that
7.
don't have their own trait. So far,
I don't like my numbers.
yeah.
If I thought about this, I would have just like made up different things. G and F.
So what this means, so ideally what you would have done is you would have. I don't think it's
3. But see, look, the horrors happen because G and F. I think 1. 2.
go, right now I'm seeing it go off the
There's
board.
no 3.
It also agrees with you too.
Let's do this.
So G and F connect from like 1 to 3.
Like, you can just, you can move forward.
Are you doing it like that? That's like a whole password right there. Maybe I'll restart because my C and my E have.
Yeah, I didn't know why it's lost. And then you just use it. Yeah.
So what I did is I had to move some of my points around along the same line so that they wouldn't cross. So you're gonna have to do that too.
So what if I move my G over enough to?
But it's not like I can use.
How would you connect?
And then you go here. And as close as you can get.
So you see the E and F connected too.
No, that clearly doesn't.
And even
That
though
clearly proves that I'm.
Okay. Again, work your way out because if you jump ahead, it messes you up. Yeah.
So are we, when we're doing this, we're comparing every single pair of letters?
As you go out, you're going to end up making more and more comparisons. It's usually easiest to like compare adjacent ones. So like here's A's next. I mean, technically you would have done A first and then B, but it doesn't matter.
Well, right, but I had a tie with G here.
Okay, so then you're gonna compare A to B, A to G, and then just start there, and you'll because you might end up connecting A here, or you might end up connecting A here, or you may end up connecting A down here. But it makes more sense to connect A to look at these two first, because it has the potential to have the most in common with those. And then if it's only like one or two things in common, then you may end up connecting back here. That makes sense. Yeah.
What if F and G have 3 things in common?
Yeah. Well, one problem is if each organism has its own unique trait, there's no way that G would come right from E.
Right.
So it would be from a common node, because E has its own thing nothing else has. So there wouldn't be a way that those would come from each other. So that's got to fix that first. Same thing with yours. If you counted up the traits, there's no way that you would make one come from the other one, because if each species has its own unique thing, it would have its own little stem.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Yeah.
So like, let's just do it real quick. G and E. How many things do G and E have in common? So you go one. No, I mean you look here. You look at this, G and E are here, right?
Yeah.
And G and E are
Good enough.
here.
Yeah.
Okay, G and E.
They're here too.
And I'd ignore this, but just look here. I mean, you're looking at your. Well, I mean, you don't have other groups written down. Okay,
out.
there. So that's why it's important to write those down.
Yeah.
So you got 1, 2, 3, right? So you go 1, 2, 3. G and E have in common. So you would go G to E there. But then you want to see maybe what do G and C have in common? Maybe G and C have more in common. So, but that's why it would be impossible for G to come off of E. Make sense?
Yeah.
Looks good so far. Question?
Can you check to see if it's actually right?
Looks fine. I mean,
Okay.
I'm not looking for what the right answer is. I'm looking for anything that looks incorrect.
Okay, so
It looks incorrect. Okay.
Yeah.
B and
So,
G are on the same line, but T and G have more in common. So would I do that and then this and then
well, if you just systematically work your way out. So I just picked one or the other. But again, what the D? Okay, so it can't come from D because there's no way that G and D have that number of things in common, because D has its own thing by itself, right? So if you count up how many things G and D have in common, it doesn't really matter which one you start with. So let's say G and D. You go G and D, how many times could it be? 1, G and D are 2, 3, G and D, 4, 5, 6. 6 things common? Is that what it? So you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Or what's that? That's not on this screen. It's gotta be on this. Is that on this screen or this screen?
Oh, okay.
So you kind of got a little ahead of yourself. I think you're thinking tree before you think in the system, how to make it.
Can you tell like that's from F and not from C right there?
Well, I mean, they're all on ring 4, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's what you. It's a palm tree. It's a 3-branch tree.
Okay.
So that's all you can say.
So for this one, like G and E and G and D both have the same amount.
And how many are there?
3. They both have 3.
And that's the agreement. 1, 2, 3.
Oh, we're only
They
gonna
connect
have
there, right?
G and G and G and E.
They all have 3 things in common. That's what this says right here.
Okay.
That's what that. Because they connect at 3.
Okay.
E, D, and G connect here together at 3.
Are we only gonna have 7?
And that's agreed.
Oh wait, so then this would be incorrect to have G
4?
off here, 4 right here instead.
Yeah,
So you have a double branch off
yeah,
of
it
this.
has to be 3.
So we only have 7 lines.
I realized
Right. 7.
Well, you have 7 species, but you're trying to make as few lines as possible.
they're gonna be.
So
So,
I'm
but
not
that,
sure what you
but
mean.
that is all connected to make sure it's all connected.
They all connect back to one stem, right?
Okay.
So I'm not sure what you mean. But I mean, you'd have to have 7 lines because you have 7 species.
Okay. Yeah.
But whether
So it's
they're
not more.
whether there's 7 long lines or 3 short lines and 4 long lines, I'm out.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what we're looking at. Okay, you're still working on your trades? Okay, that's fine. You got time.
Okay, so
Okay, I'll come back to y'all here if you have a question here. What's up? Okay. The main problem here is there's no way that G and E can come off of C because C has its own thing. So like, what I'm saying is G and C had how many things in common? Right? You have like, you have 1, G and C, G and
Okay, so I just counted
Okay, so 3. So 1, 2. Did C have a
E and A. Yeah,
C have a tree that only it had?
D and F.
So that's C should have been on that next one. That's the first part. Now that fixes that. So that was pretty much the only
I should
problem.
move A over here.
And then do G and also do G and E have. Oh no, so you can't do that.
least divergent.
But like I said, G and C.
And least divergent. The next pair species.
So yeah, right. It doesn't make sense to have things come off of it. You have to common break.
I'm just gonna move F. These literally gone. Or these
Right. I'll look at that. And then you said G and E had 1, 2, 3, 4 things in common.
F and C.
If they do, that's correct.
5.
And that looks okay. I mean, I don't know if it's right or not, but it looks fine. Okay, hang on. How's it going? You're finishing up the list here? And she's starting the process there, so you're good there. Okay, you have time to do that. And we're right there. How y'all doing here? Questions? You finishing your list up? You're not there yet? Okay. Yeah, started.
The next part species is similar
Just pick one of the others. So once you start that one, then you go to the next one. Work your way out.
Okay, I'm lost. I got lost again. So A and F have 5 things in common.
Well, how many things G we have common?
Elevated bridges.
We have to go to E and A.
G and D.
Has a cardinal mellow.
So we ignore everything else. It's G and D. That's
And then does
So the problem would be, random, like say for example, A has 4 things in common. And 4 things in common.
Hear me out.
and bridges.
We're
Yeah, we just draw.
So basically, that's where you have a.
Change it back.
I don't know what my major is. I don't have one. I needed a major just to get my financial aid, so they picked the random one for me. I'm just here for general engagement right now.
Okay, so when you are going to connect the lines, does this have one, two, three, and a plane?
No. The ring right here counts as the middle development.
Been doing anything.
Well, when I first started, when you said 11, I counted these first to make sure that's what it said. Except it don't look like I was
If you
wrong.
have same numbers,
I'm
just make sure you get the right
low-key
number.
tweaking.
Fire.
Look, I need to put.
Okay, questions?
Oh, do I have to do for F
Wrong
and
about it, I don't know if this is correct, but there's no mistakes on it.
Are we using the least amount of divergency from each other? to make the
when
line?
you go up, yes. You like F, here's F, and then C is like the next line over, and then you do it that way. I just didn't know that you had to do that.
C, D, E.
Okay. F and C. Well, I think it's easy. F and E.
Gotta move my little feet.
Yeah, so.
Minus 2.
We're all in one group.
I think I'm finished. I think I'm done. If I do say so myself. This is my tree. It looks like it's dying.
Okay, I mean, obviously, there's a group here, like,
How cute my tree
the
is.
G and A and B are, like, you know, close
Your tree does
related.
not look like a good tree.
And then, you know,
I
like
don't
this
think I did
little
this right
one
because I
called
think
clay, all are related to different.
I'm talking about my tree.
That's one way to think about it. But, you know, we haven't really quite, all we're doing right now is just making connections.
We've done nothing on Thursday, no one likes to go to C.
C should have its own.
It should be N. So from F
Is
to.
that like a map of what runs?
F and E have a compound, so 1, 2.
But I'm going from C and D. Maybe it's easier.
Oh, okay.
So we have to compare every single square.
That's correct. And it's not wrong, because you don't have any cross lines.
I put it on my tree. C was first.
And if you have multiple
I
points
put
on the
it
same
so
line.
that you did. But then there's a tie, no, there wasn't, and then F and E, and then there's a tie between 3.
E to F.
Well, no, yeah. There wasn't a tie yet. There's a tie
So,
between
make sure you got your plan right, you know, this looks okay, that looks okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
am I crazy?
Okay, and then, you know, some of the ones,
So you
so
cut
some of you
from
are
the
still in the
bottom, like,
process of doing this, I don't want to disrupt you or influence you in any way. I think everyone's done getting traits, right? You guys are all done with your trait list?
Yeah.
So here's the thing, what we're gonna do. I need to go over the rules of taxonomy, because part of this exercise is you're going to name these organisms. You don't have to have names by Thursday. It's just that I don't want to have to really talk about it on Thursday. So we'll do it today, so we can talk about taxonomy and the rules of naming. And when you turn this in, though, you're going to have species names, family names, order names, etc., made up. And so you got to make these up. These are something you have to create, synthesize. Some of them I've made up for you. The higher order names. Obviously, these are mollusks and they're gastropods, so you got that already. But the more refined names, you're going to have to come up with yourself. And they're just made up. You just make these names up, even though these have real species names. I'm not going to tell you what they are. But anyway, So there's some rules of taxonomy that we need to go over. It looks like some groups are kind of done with the tree and some groups are just starting the tree. And I think at this point in time, I've kind of guided you on how to do that. Also on Thursday, what we're going to do is we're going to do lecture content. But I'm going to have each group put their tree up on the board. And we're going to compare all the group's trees and see if there's any consensus or any kind of similarities and which ones may be more different. So make sure you have, a good idea of what your group's representative tree is going to be for Thursday. Okay, we'll do that during our last time on Thursday. Any questions? Some groups are still having some problems. It's not connect the dots, it's not like A to C to D. Each group should have its own unique traits, so it has its own stem. You're connecting at nodes, which is the number of synapoids, the number of shared derived characters. And what that's implying is a common ancestor, some common ancestry that have those combination of traits.
So let's say B and E have
You absolutely know one of them
5 things in common.
being Babylonian.
So B is
B
B and E have 5 things in common. Do I count from here?
Whatever, I don't want people to get bogged down in that, so.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But if I do that, it's all the
Okay,
same.
so
He told me no.
what I know you're wrapping it up. I want to just give you some basic background of taxonomy. Again, you're not doing this
That's the
homework
issue I had
necessarily
with the-
like right now. Like you're not writing it up and turning it
So I
in
just
tomorrow
don't see it.
because you don't have all the information.
So you just have to
you
keep
need.
trying
You're
until you
gonna
find
wait
one.
until after Thursday to make your final judgments. But part of this exercise, and I'll show you real quick what the assignment is. If you go back to the zoology page here and look at this assignment, I have this Gastropod shellfish phylogeny. This will be due next week, like on Monday by midnight. And you're going to present your assignment in the following order. 1, you need to have a phenetic analysis. That was your shells that you put on the paper and you made rings around them with pencil or pen, and you grouped them based on overall similarities and differences, right? That's number 1. That's what you're going to have at the top, under your name, 2, your cladistic analysis. And this is the branching tree that you're making right now. But what I don't want the branching tree on the target diagram. That's kind of your rough data. I want it more like what you draw on Thursday. And on Thursday, you're going to do it, but you're not going to provide any of the rings. All we need to know is who's connected to who. The length of the lines don't matter. It just matters where they connect together. That's called the nodes or the synapomorphy link. Okay? That's 2. And then 3, this is the part that gives people problems because they don't think about it, what's required. You need to provide a taxonomy, or hopefully the ideal thing is that taxonomy will reflect phylogeny. So what that means is we're going to come up with names, but we're going to come up with names that represent groupings of organisms. This is where it gets kind of complicated. But you're going to come up with names. Obviously, there are some names that already exist. These are animals. I'm not going to have you make up a new one, right? They're animalia, right? They're gastropods. They're mollusks. They're phylum Mollusca. So this is the phylum Mollusca. That's the real name. These are in the class Gastropoda, and that's the real name. And they're actually in the order Prosobranchia. The Prosobranchia is all of the shells that have a coil on them. So I'm giving you that order. All of the specimens that we have are members of the Prosobranchia, except for the list. Okay, so there's also some additional levels of taxonomy that we're going to cover here, and we're going to do that right now. So in taxonomy, this is crucial here. We have so the person who developed and invented the taxonomic method that we use today is Carl Linnaeus. And this is in roughly the 1750s. Carl Linnaeus was a botanist, he was a plant biologist in Switzerland. And Carl Linnaeus basically came up with a system of naming. Taxonomy, basically, was the system he came up with. And it's based on kind of a hierarchical levels of organization. And it goes something like this. Let me get some other pens here. So we have levels of kingdom. Go ahead and write them all out. Phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. So Carl Linnaeus came up with these basically finite levels of classification. The system is actually based on what's called a species name. This is part of a system that's called binomial nomenclature. Okay? And what that means, binomial nomenclature, is it means binomial. Nomial means name, right? And bi means two. So it's a two-name nomenclature means naming, and clature means system or organization. So what binomial nomenclature means is it's a two-name naming system. Got it? And what that really means is what's called the species. This is the hardest. I don't know why it's so hard to understand, but it's like kind of a real hard concept. What we call the species name is actually two names. It's a genus and a species together. So it is a genus plus species combined. So you would never report just a species name by itself because it doesn't make any sense. It's always the combination of the two, or you can report the genus name and say there's multiple species involved. But we're talking about a species name in terms of being two names, a genus and species combined. Humans, Homo sapiens, right? That's Homo sapiens. Your pet dog, Canis familiaris, right? That's the species name. The giraffe, Camelopardus giraffa is what the species name for giraffes. The horse, Equus caballus, right? So all species have two names, a genus name and a species name. Okay? Here's where it gets more complicated. And this is the rules, right? So you gotta follow the rules of taxonomy here. The genus name is always first letter capitalized. Cap, the genus name. You cannot cap the whole word, just the first letter. So it's like a proper noun, like your family, like your name, right? You always capitalize the first letter of your name, and that's the genus name, always capitalized. The species name is always lowercase. Okay? So you can't be creative and do all caps or things like that. It's basically capitalized genus, lowercase species. Got it? And to make life even more complex, if it's handwritten, the genus and species are underlined. So it's underlined, and I know this is nitpicky, but it's just the way it is. They're separately underlined, not like underlined together. You gotta underline them separately with a space. Or if you type them, you can use italics. But you can't claim italics in handwriting. It's called cursive, right? So just to be particular here, is if you handwrite this, you underline them, or if you type it using word processor, you can use italics or underline. Then either way is correct. Okay. So that's what the rules of the genus and species name. So every species has a pair of names, a genus and species combo. So when I say species name, I really mean genus and species together. Okay? All right, there's the rules for genus and species. Genus is always capitalized, species is always lowercase in the name. And if you write them or type them, underline them, or you can italicize them. Got it? Okay, so here's the thing. Each one of these shells is going to have a unique species name. Now that means that you have to have at least 7 unique species names, right, for these shells. So make them up. You could do whatever you want, right? Someone over here said, do I have to ignore the fact that I know it's an abalone? No, you could use abalone as a species name. That's fine. Just make sure it's lowercase or whatever. Or make up your own name. You know, shiny or whatever on the inside. The genus name, though, ideally what we do, and we'll talk more about this on Thursday, is if 2 species are kind of similar, why not give them the same genus name? And that means that we can come up with fewer names that are actually inclusive and group things together. So maybe you find that shell A and B kind of come up together pretty close, or shell A, B, and E, or whatever. I don't know. Some people showed me some branches. Wait till Thursday to make the decision. But maybe you could use a shared genus name among 2 or 3 shells, and that way the name itself gives you an idea of the grouping, right? It's kind of like using the names as bins, right? It's kind of the idea. That's what ideally, what phylogeny and taxonomy do together. Got it? Okay, so you're going to have 7, at least 7 species names. You're going to have probably less than 7 genus names because 2 species can share the same genus. It doesn't tell us any information if you just come up with one genus name and list all 7 species under that, because it's basically showing like a palm tree where there's no relationships, right? Got it? Okay, family names. There's some rules for family as well. Family name always ends in I-D-A-E. So the family name ends in ide. So for humans, hominidity. For dogs, your pet dog, canidae. For horses, equidae, right? Cats, felidae. So the what is it? Giraffes, giraffidae is their genus or their family. So the ide ending is the epithet. It's the ending of all family names in animals. In botany, there's an exception. In botany, they use ACA as a family ending, right? Remember in botany, there's like the Compositaceae or the Rosaceae. That is kind of a historical artifact of botany versus zoology. But what's happening now is in like microbiology and in fungus biology and protist biology, the ide ending is winning. And it's now only plants that have ACA as the ending. The other kingdoms, protists and fungi, all use ide. Okay? So your family ending has to end in ide, and you have to come up with probably 2 or 3 families. And I'll show you how to do that, how to decide how many you need on Thursday. But ideally you'd have maybe 2 or 3 names that you would use to group multiple species names into, and that would give you information about that. And then I think I gave you order, right? The order is Prosopranchia. So the order I give you is the actual order name for this group. So you're making up family names, maybe 2 or 3. No requirement, but based on what your playground shows. You're going to come up with probably, 4 four or six genus names, and you're going to have 7 different species names to go with each of those genus groups. And there's a specific way to write those out, and I have kind of an idealized version here. So your family must end with ide, and then within that family, you would list the species that belong to that family. And again, genus and species. Genus is capitalized, species is lowercase, and then you'd italicize those or underline them, depending on which type you're handwritten. And then you list family too with ide and list the species that are in that family. This is what's called a species list. And I'm going to give you a little template here, but your list is going to have at least 7 different species, right? So we'll remind you of this on Thursday, but begin thinking about species names. To start thinking about what you want to use for species names. Don't make any final decisions about genus and family names yet, because you may end up changing your mind based on what we talked about on Thursday and how the classification goes, right? And then in the end, I would like you to make your taxonomic classification, the naming of organisms, based on your cladogram, because the cladogram is what's correct today. This is what everyone does for classification ideally. This is olden days. Phenetic classification is what was done certainly prior to 1950s, but it's still done today, but we're getting away from using similarities and differences for classification, and now we're just doing on shared derived traits is kind of the idea in all disciplines, botany and zoology. So, okay, that gives you a background on classification. I've given you names: Animalia, Mollusca, Gastropoda, Prosopranchia. You're going to need to come up with family, genus, and species names. We'll revisit this on Thursday. Thursday, we're going to have the International Symposium on Gastropod classification, and each university is going to come up and put their results up, and then we'll do a discussion kind of on if there's any common patterns that we're seeing, and I'll refresh your memory on what's due here, but I'll kind of point out some pitfalls of where people go wrong, but you're going to make sure that you have 7 different things. We don't need to worry about the outgroup and naming is that will be extra if we want to, but we're just looking at these 7 pieces. Okay, right. Remember which university you were, so you can do your pin again. But put those back in that tin. Maybe put the tin back up here for me. Just go ahead and put it up here in the front. And if you have any questions, I can come around and ask them. You're free to
It doesn't
go.
matter if it's straight down. It doesn't have to be
Good job, everybody. Actually, that's pretty good.